The cold seared my lungs, each breath a sharp reminder of the November air biting at my exposed skin. I stood in the doorway of the old town hall. The grand oak doors closed behind me, a stark barrier between the icy wind and the stifling silence of the room I'd just left. Inside, Marcus, my only son, sat stone-faced, his eyes fixed on the mahogany table as if it held all the answers. Serena, my daughter-in-law, was a picture of elegant fury, her carefully constructed composure shattered, her chest heaving with silent, venomous breaths. They hadn't seen the evidence yet, not truly. They hadn't heard the recordings or read the final, damning words. But they felt it. The air was thick with a chilling realization that their meticulously woven web of lies, spun around my beloved Eleanor, was about to unravel. My hands, still trembling from the weight of the truth I was about to unleash, clenched into fists. I looked from the pristine, snow-dusted New England street to the dark, imposing facade of the hall, and a single question echoed in the cavernous space of my grief-stricken mind. How had we come to this? And perhaps, more hauntingly, how had I not seen it sooner? My name is Arthur Blackburn, and I'm 65 years old. For 40 years, I designed buildings that shaped skylines, sketching dreams into reality on drafting paper. But for 62 years, I lived for Eleanor. She was my anchor, my compass, the quiet, vibrant pulse of our little world. Eleanor, my wife, my partner, my best friend, was gone. It had been 7 weeks. 7 long, desolate weeks since her sudden, inexplicable decline had culminated in a silent, solitary collapse in our sun-drenched reading nook, taking her last breath before I could even reach her. The doctors called it a rapid deterioration, a complex interplay of her existing heart condition and an aggressive, undiagnosed neurological event. They offered their condolences, their professional regrets, and a prescription for grief counseling. I nodded, thanked them, and walked out into a world that felt muted, a watercolor painting washed out by a relentless rain. Each day was a muted landscape of grief, a gray canvas where vibrant memories once stood. I would wander through our home, the place we'd built together, and find myself stopping in doorways, listening for a sound that would never come again. Her gentle humming from the kitchen, the rustle of a page turning in her reading nook, the soft clinking of her thimbles as she worked on a quilt. The silence was a physical weight, pressing down on me, making each breath a conscious effort. Eleanor was a librarian, not the stern, shushing kind, but the one who knew every child's favorite author, who could recommend a book that would change your life, who saw stories everywhere. She radiated warmth, a quiet intelligence that drew people in. Her laughter was a soft chime, her smile a beacon of genuine kindness. Our life in Crestwood, a charming, historic town nestled in the rolling hills of New England, had been a tapestry woven with peace, shared laughter, and a comfortable rhythm of 2 souls perfectly attuned. We had our routines. Morning coffee on the porch swing, watching the sunrise paint the sky, evening walks through the town square hand in hand, discussing books she'd read or the curious characters she'd met at the library. Quiet dinners were spent debating the merits of classic literature versus contemporary fiction, or simply sharing the small, significant moments of our day. She was a woman of quiet strength, grounded in the real, yet always open to the wonder of the world. Our son, Marcus, 35, and his wife, Serena, 33, lived in a trendy loft apartment in the city, a 2-hour drive away. Marcus was charismatic, always full of grand ideas for the next big app or sustainable startup, none of which had ever truly materialized beyond enthusiastic pitches and empty promises. He had a knack for making things sound brilliant, for drawing people into his vision, but a consistent habit of failing to deliver. Serena, stunningly beautiful and always impeccably dressed, was an aspiring social media influencer whose life seemed to revolve around curated aesthetics and chasing fleeting trends. Her Instagram feed was a kaleidoscope of perfect lattes, designer outfits, and exotic travel destinations, all carefully staged and filtered. They were, in a word, ambitious. In another, perpetually broke. They burned through money with a casual disregard that often left me quietly concerned. But Eleanor, ever the optimist, always believed Marcus would eventually find his footing. The first hint that something was amiss didn't come with a crash or a bang, but with a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the air, like the pressure drop before a storm. It started roughly 8 months before Eleanor's death, when Marcus and Serena began visiting us more frequently. Not just the usual monthly Sunday dinner, which we cherished, but spontaneous midweek trips, ostensibly to check in on us or to escape the city grind. They'd arrive with a flurry of apologies for not calling ahead, then charm us with stories of their latest ventures, bringing thoughtful gifts, a new brand of artisanal coffee for me, a rare edition book for Eleanor, and showering us with attention. It felt good, initially. A renewed connection with our son and daughter-in-law, a sense of them reaching out, caring more deeply. We were delighted, attributing it to their growing maturity, their recognition of the importance of family. But then Serena began to focus, with almost surgical precision, on Eleanor's health. Eleanor, always meticulously organized, had recently started taking a new multivitamin and a heart-specific supplement recommended by her cardiologist. Serena, with her bright, effervescent charm, would insist on helping Eleanor organize her daily pill boxes, clucking sympathetically about how easy it was to forget a dose as one got older. "Mom, let me just sort these for you," she'd say, her voice dripping with practiced affection. "You've got so much on your plate with the library's summer reading program and all those outreach events. You barely have time to breathe." Eleanor, ever trusting and appreciative of help, especially as she started to feel more fatigued, would wave her off with a grateful smile, accepting Serena's offers with genuine warmth. I remember one Tuesday afternoon, walking into the kitchen to find Serena meticulously arranging Eleanor's pill organizer, her brow furrowed in concentration. Eleanor was napping on the sofa, a rare occurrence in the middle of the day, especially for her. Serena offered a quick explanation. Eleanor had felt a bit lightheaded after their walk in the park, just needed a moment to rest. "It's nothing serious, Arthur, just a little dip in energy. Happens to everyone, doesn't it?" she'd said, her smile wide and reassuring. I thought nothing of it. Serena was just being a caring daughter-in-law, a thoughtful young woman looking out for her husband's mother. Or so I believed. The thought of anything more sinister simply wouldn't have crossed my mind. Our family was a safe, loving unit, or so I had always believed. But the subtle shifts continued, almost imperceptibly at first, then with an accelerating, unsettling rhythm. Eleanor, usually so sharp and quick-witted, began experiencing moments of confusion that were uncharacteristic and deeply worrying. She'd misplace her reading glasses, which was normal, but then she'd forget an important appointment, or repeat a story she'd told just hours before, completely unaware she was doing so. Her energy, once boundless and vibrant, dwindled into a persistent, weary lassitude. She complained of a constant, low-level fog in her mind, a feeling of being perpetually unwell, despite her doctors reassuring her that her standard blood tests and heart function tests showed nothing alarming. They attributed it to age, stress, the general wear and tear of life. "It happens, Mrs. Blackburn," her doctor had said gently. "Sometimes our bodies just need more rest." I saw the worry etch itself deeper onto her face with each passing week, marring the usually serene canvas of her features. "Arthur," she confessed quietly, her hand reaching for mine across the breakfast table, her touch seeking reassurance. "I feel like I'm losing a piece of myself. I can't quite put my finger on it, but something isn't right. My mind feels hazy, like I'm watching my own life through a thick pane of glass." I'd hold her close, offer what comfort I could, attributing it to the natural progression of age, the cumulative stress of her demanding job as a head librarian, or even the subtle changes in the New England climate. I was looking for a logical explanation, desperately trying to reassure us both, unwilling to consider anything more complex or sinister. I wanted to believe it was benign, that everything would eventually return to normal. Then came the discussions about our finances, masked as future planning. Marcus, ever the entrepreneur, started bringing up various investment opportunities, always with the caveat that we should look at optimizing your assets, Dad, for maximum security and growth in your golden years. He'd subtly hint at the rising property values in Crestwood, the potential to downsize or reinvest in something more lucrative in the city, where real opportunities lay. His arguments were compelling, delivered with the practiced ease of a seasoned salesman, but I felt an underlying pressure, a subtle current of urgency that didn't quite sit right. Eleanor, usually the pragmatist and fiercely protective of our shared home, found these conversations increasingly draining. She loved our home, the sprawling garden she'd meticulously cultivated, the proximity to the library where her heart resided. "We're perfectly happy where we are, Marcus," she'd say gently, her voice tinged with a weariness that unnerved me. "This house is our history. It's where your childhood memories were made." But Marcus and Serena were relentless, their arguments veiled in a concern that felt increasingly hollow, their voices carrying a slight edge of impatience I hadn't noticed before. They even suggested an update to our will and power of attorney, just to make sure everything's clear and simplified for the future, should anything unexpected happen. We had these documents in place for decades, meticulously drawn up by our family lawyer, Evelyn Thorne, Eleanor's closest friend since childhood. But their insistence, the way they kept circling back to the topic, planted a seed of doubt. Why the sudden uncharacteristic urgency? It felt like an intrusion, a violation of the quiet sanctity of our life. One evening, about 4 months before Eleanor passed, I found her sitting alone in her study, a usually vibrant room now shadowed by an unspoken dread. The evening light filtered through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, but her face was obscured by a profound sadness. She was clutching a small leather-bound journal, her knuckles white, her hands trembling almost imperceptibly. Her usual grace was replaced by a rigid tension. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice barely audible, raw with suppressed emotion. "Do you remember signing any new documents about our estate recently? Specifically, about a power of attorney?" I frowned, racking my brain. "No, darling. Our last update was years ago with Evelyn. Why would we need another? What's wrong?" She shook her head slowly, a single crystalline tear tracing a path down her cheek, a tear that cut me to the core. "Marcus, he mentioned something about bringing by some papers for us to review a few months back. I thought I must have forgotten. But I don't feel like I forgot. I feel like something is being done to me, something I can't quite grasp." Her eyes, usually sparkling with life and intelligence, were wide with fear I'd never seen before, a deep, primal fear that chilled me to the bone. That night, a chill settled deep in my bones, a cold premonition that something far darker than simple age was at play. A tendril of unease began to twine its way around my heart. But Eleanor, ever resilient, ever determined, composed herself with a visible effort. She straightened her shoulders, took a deep breath. She promised me she would look into it, quietly, without alarming Marcus or Serena. "Just a small check for my own peace of mind," she'd said, trying to smile, but the expression was strained, almost brittle. It was the last time I saw her truly smile without a shadow clinging to its edges, a final, poignant memory that would haunt me later. 2 days after Eleanor's funeral, my world still felt like shattered glass. The house was too quiet, filled with ghosts of laughter, and a lingering scent of her favorite Earl Grey tea. Every object, every photograph, was a searing reminder of her absence, a testament to the void she'd left behind. The phone rang, startling me from my melancholic reverie. It was Evelyn Thorne, her voice tight, with mixture of grief and an urgency that cut through my haze. "Arthur," she began, her tone unusually grave, I think you need to come down to my office. Eleanor left something with me, something important, and she made me promise not to open it unless she was gone." My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. A cold dread began to seep into my bones, replacing the dull ache of grief. "What is it, Evelyn?" I asked, my voice raw, barely a whisper. She said it was for your eyes only. And she also said to be very careful who you tell about it, especially Marcus and Serena. The specific mention of our son and daughter-in-law ignited a spark of suspicion, connecting Eleanor's earlier fears and the unease that had permeated our last months together. Evelyn's law office was a quiet haven of mahogany and leather, exuding an air of understated professionalism, a stark contrast to the emotional maelstrom churning within me. She led me to her private office, her face uncharacteristically grim, the usual twinkle in her eyes replaced by a profound sadness and concern. On her polished desk sat a worn wooden box, the kind Eleanor used to keep her cherished antique thimbles in, a sentimental object that instantly brought a lump to my throat. "She gave this to me about 6 months ago, Arthur," Evelyn explained, her voice hushed, her gaze unwavering. She was increasingly worried. Arthur said she felt her memory fading, her judgment clouding, and she needed a failsafe. She trusted me completely. Inside the box, nestled amongst faded silk ribbons, was a single, sealed envelope addressed to me in Eleanor's elegant script. "My dearest Arthur, if you are reading this, I am no longer with you. Please know this was not natural. Trust Evelyn. Trust no one else. Not yet." My breath hitched, a choked gasp escaping my lips. The words, so direct, so chilling, struck me with the force of physical blow. Not natural. The phrase echoed in my mind, an ominous refrain. Beneath the letter was a small, encrypted USB drive, an old flip phone, and a thick hand-bound journal, its pages filled with Eleanor's distinctive handwriting. The journal was Eleanor's, a familiar sight, but its contents were anything but. It was filled with her precise, meticulous handwriting. But it wasn't her usual musings on literature or community events, nor her eloquent observations of the changing seasons. Instead, it was a chilling, systematic chronicle of her declining health and her growing, terrifying suspicions. She had recorded every instance of Serena helping with her medication, noting specific times and dates, even the color and shape of the pills Serena had offered. She detailed the new health drinks Serena had encouraged her to consume, drinks that often left her feeling disoriented, nauseous, and profoundly fatigued. There were entries about overhearing hushed phone calls, fragmented conversations between Serena and Marcus about the timeline and the paperwork, terms that now took on a sinister resonance. Eleanor, with her librarian's instinct for patterns and her quiet, unyielding persistence, had begun to suspect she was being deliberately incapacitated. She had recorded the gradual, almost imperceptible shifts in her cognitive abilities, the memory lapses, the strange fogginess that clung to her thoughts, all correlating precisely with Serena's increased involvement in her daily routine. The USB drive contained scans of our financial statements, meticulously highlighting suspicious transfers, not huge sums at first, designed to avoid immediate detection, but enough to drain our joint savings over time, always routed through a series of complex shell accounts and offshore entities. And most damningly, a copy of a power of attorney document, dated just 3 months prior, bearing what appeared to be my and Eleanor's signatures. But Eleanor had meticulously circled the discrepancies, the subtle deviations from her usual signature, the slightly heavier pressure on certain letters, the almost imperceptible tremor that was not hers. She hadn't signed it, and neither had I. The implications were horrifying, a betrayal so profound it felt like a physical assault. My world, already shattered by grief, splintered further, revealing a dark, festering core of deceit. Eleanor, my brilliant, kind Eleanor, hadn't just been losing her memory. She had been systematically undermined, slowly poisoned, her vibrant mind dulled by a deliberate, calculated campaign. My son and his wife. The thought was a venomous snake coiling in my gut, squeezing the last vestiges of hope and trust from my soul. "Evelyn," I choked out, the words catching my throat. "The phone, what's on the phone?" She nodded, her own eyes brimming with tears, her expression a mirror of my shock and horror. Eleanor thought they might be listening. She kept this one hidden in her old gardening shed, tucked away in an old terracotta pot. She said it had an old voice recording app. She wanted to capture everything, a final safeguard. Evelyn, with trembling fingers, activated the old flip phone. The first recording was a low-quality conversation, muffled by distance but horrifyingly clear. Serena's sharp, impatient voice. "He's practically deaf, Marcus. He'll never hear me. Just keep Mom on her routine." It's working. She's barely coherent half the time, repeating herself constantly. Marcus's voice hesitant, tinged with a flicker of unease. "But what if someone finds out? What if Dad notices?" Serena's cold, dismissive laugh, a sound that grated on my nerves. Nobody cares about an old woman's natural decline. It's all perfectly legal on paper. We'll be in the clear. The recordings continue. A horrifying tapestry woven from a casual discussion about elementary children. Their cynical plans to liquidate our assets, to sell the house, to set themselves up for life, with our hard-earned money. The routine Serena had so carefully orchestrated involved a gradual and consistent alteration of Eleanor's prescribed heart medication, replacing some of the powerful settings designed to induce confusion, memory loss, and a general state of disorientation. The source, Eleanor's natural, was a sweet online pharmacy Serena had discovered through acquaintance. It was a slow, agonizing poison, carefully administered, designed to mimic the symptoms of natural aging and fatal harm, to make a decline occur utterly natural and non-approach. My lowest point wasn't finding out my son was food, or that he was involved in financial fraud. It was hearing his voice filled with such casual indifference, such a shocking lack of empathy, as he discussed his mother's slow, agonizing demise. The grief I felt for Eleanor was now compounded by a burning, suffocating rage, a cold fury that settled deep in my bones. The naive, loving father in me died a swift, brutal death that afternoon, replaced by something harder, colder, utterly determined. "We need proof, Arthur," Evelyn said, her voice steely, pulling me back from the brink of despair. Her eyes held a fierce determination that mirrored my own. Undeniable proof. For the police. For a jury. Something that leaves no room for doubt. Evelyn immediately contacted a former colleague, Reese Sullivan, a retired detective now running a private investigative firm, highly respected for his meticulous work. Reese was a man of quiet intensity, with eyes that seemed to see everything, and a calm, reassuring demeanor that, despite the gravity of the situation, inspired immediate trust and confidence. He listened to our story without interruption, his gaze never leaving my face, occasionally jotting notes on a small pad. He pored over Eleanor's journal, the USB contents, and the shocking audio recordings, his expression unreadable. "This is a meticulously planned act of elder abuse, financial fraud, and potentially homicide," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion, a cold, hard fact. "We need to confirm the medication tampering and secure more direct admissions. We need them to incriminate themselves." Reese, Evelyn, and I formed a grim pact. Reese developed a plan, precise and calculated. We would use my grief as a shield. I would move back into the house, feigning continued despair and despondency, allowing Marcus and Serena to believe their plan was succeeding without a hitch, that I was simply too lost in grief to notice anything amiss. Reese, a master of discreet surveillance, installed miniature cameras and audio recorders throughout our home. In the kitchen, carefully tucked into a smoke detector. In the living room, hidden inside a bookshelf clock. Even a tiny microphone disguised as a charging adapter in my study. "They'll grow complacent, Arthur," Reese had predicted, his voice calm but firm. "People like this, once they think they've won, once they feel safe, they get careless. They talk, and we'll be listening." It was the hardest role I'd ever had to play. Every meal shared with Marcus and Serena, every forced smile I had to conjure, every feigned nod of agreement as they discussed settling Eleanor's estate, felt like a profound betrayal of my late wife, a desecration of her memory. Serena, emboldened by what she perceived as my declining mental state, even pushed harder, trying to convince me to put the house on the market, to simplify things, Dad. Mom would have wanted you to be comfortable, without the burden of such a large property. I'd nod vaguely, mumbling about considering it when I felt stronger, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. The internal conflict was agonizing, a constant battle between my desperate desire to lash out and the strategic imperative to maintain my cover. But the image of Eleanor's fearful eyes, her desperate notes, her final, chilling message, they fueled my resolve, giving me strength I didn't know I possessed. I would endure this living hell for her. It took almost 3 weeks. 3 agonizing weeks of playing the grieving widower, of watching them, listening to their veiled suggestions, their thinly disguised eagerness to claim what they believed was theirs, to strip away every last vestige of Eleanor's life. I sat across from them at dinner, forcing down food, nodding along to their casual discussions about my financial future, the future they envisioned for me, a future devoid of the woman who had loved them unconditionally. Every night, the resentment festered, a toxic brew of anger and sorrow. I went to bed feeling sick to my stomach, and every morning I woke up and did again, a constant, grueling performance. Reese's words echoed in my mind. The moment they felt truly safe was the moment they'd stop being careful. And then one evening, after a particularly strained dinner where Serena had spent 20 minutes detailing the exorbitant costs of home maintenance, I feigned fatigue and retreated to my bedroom, leaving them alone in the kitchen. The hidden microphones picked up everything. Serena, her voice dripping with triumph, a horrifyingly casual callousness. The last of the transfers went through this morning, Marcus. We're finally clear. We've cleaned out his investment accounts, just like we planned. And once Arthur signs off on the house, we're set. We won't even need that flimsy POA anymore. Marcus, his voice a mix of relief and lingering anxiety, a faint tremor of conscience. Just don't get sloppy like you did with Mom. Serena, remember that pharmacist's query about the dosage increase? You almost slipped up. We can't afford any more mistakes. Serena laughed, a chilling, careless sound that scraped against my soul. Oh, please, Marcus. Nobody questions an old woman's natural decline, especially when they're already on heart medication. It's too easy. They just see what they expect to see. Old age, fragility. It's perfect. Her words, delivered with such cold calculation, solidified the horror. They hadn't just stolen money. They had stolen Eleanor's last days, her peace of mind, her dignity. Reese had the recordings within the hour, a digital file marked with timestamp, undeniably damning, coupled with the meticulous forensic analysis of the forged power of attorney signatures, which had confirmed every detail Eleanor had circled, the meticulous records in Eleanor's journal, and the complex financial trails Evelyn had painstakingly uncovered. We had what Reese called an airtight case. The medical examiner, re-examining Eleanor's records at Reese's insistence, had found profound anomalies that strongly suggested the presence of unprescribed sedatives and dangerously high levels of her regular heart medication. A full toxicology report was ordered, and the grim process of exhumation began, a necessary but agonizing step to confirm what we now knew in our hearts. Reese looked at me across his desk that night, his face solemn. "Arthur," he said quietly, "we're ready. Now we bring them in the open on our terms, not theirs." The confrontation was set for the reading of Eleanor's final will, carefully arranged by Evelyn for maximum impact. Marcus and Serena arrived at Evelyn's office, dressed in somber but expensive attire, radiating a quiet, almost smug confidence. They greeted me with saccharine smiles and feigned sympathy, believing this was merely a formality, a rubber stamp on their ill-gotten gains, the final step in their audacious plan. They had no idea Reese Sullivan was in the adjacent conference room, discreetly monitoring everything, while that two uniformed officers were waiting patiently outside, their unmarked patrol car blending into the street traffic. I sat opposite them, my face carefully blank, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest, a maelstrom of emotions swirling beneath a placid exterior. Evelyn began the reading, her voice professional, even as her eyes darted to me, a silent message of support, a reassurance that justice was at hand. After the initial clauses, detailing Eleanor's various charitable donations and smaller bequests, she paused, her gaze settling firmly on Marcus and Serena. "Before we proceed to the distribution of assets," she said, her voice clear and resonant, "there's a matter that needs to be addressed. Arthur, would you like to speak?" I met their gaze, a lifetime of love and betrayal warring within me, a silent narrative of everything that had led us to this unbearable moment. "Actually, yes," I said, my voice steady, devoid of any discernible emotion. "I think it's time we all heard Eleanor's true final wishes, and perhaps a few other things she wanted to share." I nodded towards the door. Reese Sullivan walked in, his presence immediately commanding attention, followed by two uniformed police officers. Marcus's jaw dropped, a flicker of raw panic in his eyes, his carefully composed facade cracking. Serena's perfectly sculpted face went white, her breath catching in her throat, her carefully constructed composure threatening to shatter. "What is this, Arthur?" she hissed, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and outrage, her eyes darting frantically between me, Reese, and the officers. "What are you doing? This is completely inappropriate." I simply looked at her, my eyes holding a lifetime of unspoken words, a silent accusation. "I'm doing what Eleanor asked me to do," I said, my voice unwavering. "I'm telling the truth, the whole truth." Reese placed his laptop on the conference table, its screen casting a cold, blue glow. With a click, the muffled but unmistakable recording of Serena's voice filled the room. Nobody questions an old woman's natural decline, especially when they're already on heart medication. It's too easy. The air crackled with tension, thick and suffocating. Marcus slowly buried his face in his hands, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Serena sprang to her feet, knocking her chair backward with violent clatter, the sound echoing ominously in the sudden silence. That's edited. It's out of context. You're framing us. This is outrageous. One of the officers stepped forward, his voice calm but firm, cutting through Serena's hysteria. Mrs. Blackburn, anything you say can and will be used against you. We have forensic evidence, irrefutable financial records, and medical reports. We also have a signed confession from the online pharmacist who supplied the sedatives you used to drug your mother-in-law. That last detail was a final twist, the unexpected blow that shattered any remaining illusions. The online pharmacist wasn't just a random vendor. He was Serena's estranged half-brother, Danny, a former pharmacy student expelled for illicit dealings, a man with a dark past and a desperate need for money. Serena had sought him out, exploiting his vulnerabilities, promising him a substantial cut of the inheritance in exchange for his complicity in securing the illicit sedatives and manipulating Eleanor's prescription refills. Danny, however, had panicked when the exhumation was ordered, when the full weight of the investigation began to close in. He'd cut a deal with the authorities, spilling every detail, every illicit transaction, every conversation he'd had with Serena, in exchange for a lighter sentence. This made the web of deceit even more horrifyingly intimate, a twisted family affair. Marcus looked up, his face streaked with tears, his eyes red-rimmed and swollen. A broken man. Dad, he choked out, his voice raw with a desperate plea for understanding. I never wanted her to die. I swear, we just want to convince you both to downsize, to free up some capital for our business. Serena said it would be so much easier if Mom was less resistant. The medication, that was Serena's idea to make Mom less difficult, keep her confused, keep her compliant. I swear, I never wanted to go this far. His confession, desperate and pathetic, felt like a knife twisting in an already gaping wound. My son, my only son, had been a willing participant in the slow murder of his mother for money, for a fleeting chance at financial success. I felt Evelyn's hand on my arm, a gentle, grounding pressure, reminding me to breathe, to stay calm. Marcus, I said, my voice quiet, almost a whisper, but carrying the weight of years of love and betrayal. Your mother spent her life nurturing you, guiding you, giving you everything she had. She sat in this very living room, reading you bedtime stories, sacrificing her own desires for your future. And you sat across from her, counting down the days until you could inherit her life, until you could profit from her decline. My words, simple and direct, seemed to land with more force than any shout. The detectives, who had been observing quietly, stepped forward. Marcus offered no further resistance as the officers read him his rights, his head bowed in shame. Serena, however, continued to protest, her voice shrill and defiant, even as the handcuffs were placed on her wrists. This is a setup. You'll regret this, Arthur. You'll regret ruining your own son. Her words, once designed to wound, now held no power over me. They were the desperate cries of a cornered animal, pathetic and hollow. It's been over a year now since that day in Evelyn Thorne's office, a day that forever reshaped the landscape of my life. Marcus pled guilty to conspiracy to commit financial fraud and elder abuse, his lawyer advising him that the evidence was insurmountable. He's serving a 5-year sentence in a state penitentiary, a place so far removed from the privileged life he envisioned, it's almost poetic. Serena, facing the full weight of the evidence, including Danny's detailed testimony, the irrefutable toxicology report from Eleanor's exhumation, which showed dangerously high levels of sedatives and alter-heart medication, and the damning audio recordings, was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, forgery, and aggravated financial exploitation. She received a 15-year sentence, a sentence that felt, in its own way, like a small measure of justice. Danny, Serena's half-brother, received a 5-year sentence for his role in distributing controlled substances and aiding in the crime. his cooperation earning him some leniency, but not a full escape from accountability. I still live in our home on Maple Heights Lane. It's not quiet in the same desolate way anymore, the way it was in the initial weeks of grief. Now it's a peaceful quiet, a comforting stillness, a space filled with Eleanor's memory, untainted by the shadow of betrayal. The money, every penny they had siphoned from our accounts, was recovered and returned through civil proceedings thanks to Evelyn's tireless efforts. But as I told Reese and Evelyn countless times, the money was never really the point. The point was Eleanor's dignity, her final message, her fierce, unwavering love. Evelyn and I have become closer than ever, a shared grief and a successful pursuit of justice forging an unbreakable bond. She is not just my lawyer, but a steadfast friend, a confidant who understood the depth of my pain and the righteous anger that propelled me forward. Richard Holloway, Eleanor's former employer from the original story idea, I've incorporated aspects of that source story for length. We've been proud of how Eleanor ensured justice. We talk often about Eleanor sharing stories, keeping her memory vibrant and alive. The Eleanor Blackburn Arts and Literacy Fund, established in her name, is thriving, growing beyond our wildest expectations. It supports local artists, purchases books for underprivileged schools, funds outreach programs for adult literacy, and provides scholarships for aspiring writers and librarians. Every donation, every new book on a shelf, every young mind inspired, carries Eleanor's name forward. Her legacy, far from being diminished by the darkness that sought to consume it, shines brighter than ever, a testament to her enduring spirit and the quiet power of a life well lived. I often think about that fateful phone call from Evelyn, the weight of Eleanor's journal in my hands, her final, haunting message. Please know this was not natural. She fought to tell me the truth, to protect me, even from beyond the grave. She was my anchor, my compass. In her final act, she guided me through the darkest storm of my life. And I intend to spend every remaining year ensuring that her courage meant something, that her final act of love and protection echoed to the lives of others, a constant affirmation of her beautiful spirit.